If you had to paint the gutter, which color would you choose? Said the patron to the painter. The painter said the blues. Do you act off intuition or languish and peruse? More like tap into tradition from the angle of my mood.
Hi, this is Justin Coletti. You may know me from Sonic Scoop, but today I'm on the Plugin Alliance channel, and we have the privilege of talking to one Mr. Craig Bauer today. Craig, how are you doing?
Never better.
Great to have you here, man. In case you're not familiar with him, Craig is a Grammy-winning mix engineer. He's worked with clients likes of Lupe Fiasco, Justin Timberlake, The Neighbors, Ed Sheeran, Janet Jackson, Rihanna, Common, and so many more. He's worked across genres in pop, R&B, hip-hop, rock, and you name it. And today we're going to be talking about what was one of his favorite compressors in hardware form, and now maybe one of his favorite compressor plugins. He has been asking for this plugin to be made for a long, long time now. Craig, is that true?
Almost 10 years to the day, actually.
Wow. This new compressor that we were talking about is called the AMEK Mastering Compressor, and it is modeled after a piece of hardware owned by Dirk Ulrich and also owned for a long time by Craig Bauer. It was one of his favorite compressors, one that was really known for being really transparent and giving you kind of extra flexibility and control over just how you're controlling the dynamics. So before we get too much into talking about this new AMEK Mastering Compressor, can you give us just a brief sense of the piece of hardware that this one is inspired by? It's something that you owned and used for a long time. What were some of your favorite things about it, and what did you miss when you stopped having the real thing in your studio?
Well, I actually own two of them, Justin, amazingly enough. And it's a classic compressor from back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it became literally the go-to on pretty much everything, literally even on the recording side. When I would record vocals, I used it, which, you know, can be mildly tricky if you get it wrong. So you try not to get it wrong while you're recording. Unbelievable flexibility. You can kind of shape dynamics in any kind of way that you could possibly think of. It was just the most utilitarian piece of gear that you could possibly imagine. You weren't locked into any particular sound other than the fact that it was extremely transparent sounding.
Sweet. And I feel like that's a similar thing I've heard from so many people, just how transparent it can be even when you're applying significant amounts of compression. So with this new plugin, the AMEK Mastering Compressor, did it feel familiar when you started using it? And how do you feel like the sound compares to what you remembered?
I think familiar would be an understatement. It is wildly accurate to what I remember. It's been quite some time since I actually had the hardware. But sonically speaking, the transparency, the ability to shape dynamics is just absolutely remarkable. And I can easily and honestly tell you that in the few weeks that I've had this plugin, it is now at the top of the list. There is nothing that it doesn't work on. I know it's called a mastering compressor, but I'm not a mastering engineer, and I have used it on anything you could possibly think of in the past number of weeks.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm almost surprised they gave it this name, although it is totally suitable for mastering just for the transparency that you can get out of it. The actual physical units of these, I know a lot of people use them on vocals and so many other sources. As a predominantly mixing engineer, what are some of your favorite applications for this particular type of compressor?
Vocals is at the top of the list. It's on my mix bus on a number of things since I've received it. Drum loops, bass is a great one. I've used it on anything you could possibly think of with incredible success, only because, as we've already mentioned, you can drive it extremely hard and still have it be very transparent. You can use it very subtly, and it just provides the exact right amount of dynamics control without disappearing into the abyss, so to speak, enough to make a difference but not be overwhelming. I know it sounds cliche to say this because we're constantly bombarded by content of people speaking about various plugins, but there is just something unbelievably special about this particular plugin.
That's amazing to hear. And I really think as much weight as Craig's word carries, you probably shouldn't take Craig's word for it. Go over to plugin-alliance.com where you can try out this new plugin or anything else they make for free for 2 weeks. Also, if you are a member of the Mega Subscription Bundle, this is now just yet another plugin that's included in your Mega Subscription Bundle at no additional charge. And if you are a subscriber, you'll have a first shot to try out these things exactly when they come out. Now, Craig, you're about to start filming for us some kind of demonstrations and walkthroughs of you using this plugin. What do you have in store for us? What kind of things are we going to hear this on? And what kind of settings are you putting in on those instruments?
Well, I've got two tracks that I've worked in, and both of these tracks were mixed in the past and have already been released. I have a Lupe Fiasco track from his most recent record, which was finished, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago. And I have a rock pop record from a guy named Colin Peterick, who is an incredible artist and unbelievably talented. I have it on drum loops, I have it on vocals, I have it on bass, I have it on the mix bus. I don't know, I've got 6 or 7 different examples. One of the things that I experimented with that isn't going to be in this particular video, but I did provide it to Plugin Alliance for their website, was using it on a tambourine that had a transient that was so brutal that it would just knock you back. And you can apply a peak control that just handles transients and crank it up to the point where, I mean, it was extreme, but you can crank it up to the point where you make the transients so tame that it almost starts to sound like a shaker. Extreme, but that just it displays the range of what this thing can actually do.
Yeah, and I think it's a great segue into, I think, what makes this compressor unique as far as the controls go. There's really almost like three compressors in one here. You have three separate compression kind of detector circuits. You've got this slow circuit that's more of an averaging compressor, this fast detector circuit that's, I think, about 30 times faster than that slow one. And then you have this peak one that's just catching those initial transients. How are you likely to use each of those three types of controls? What do you feel like each of those three modes of detecting the signal and applying compression do for you?
Well, the interesting thing is you can actually use them in combination, all three of them at once if you want to. If you're trying to literally do something a bit more subtle, then just the slow detector with a kind of average to slower attack and release time does the trick. There's a soft knee side to it where the compression is actually variable as it bends around the knee. You can throw it into a fixed ratio for more of a dramatic and solid amount of compression. And there's a couple other controls in here that are really interesting that people may look at the compressor initially and not totally understand exactly what these particular parameters are doing, even though some of them are very familiar. There's a timing control that actually combines attack and release at the same time for both the slow detector and the fast detector. So it's attack and release in one knob. And that might sound limiting, so to speak, in some respects, but there's also one other parameter that kind of gets around it. There's this parameter called hysteresis. So when using the slow detector at a slower timing, you can crank up this hysteresis, and it's more like a secondary release control that'll allow the compressor to recover much quicker, so you can kind of get a slower attack and a fast release at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. I think that's some of the clearest I've ever heard it put. By selecting between these three different detector types, you can get even finer control over attack and release. And then the release hysteresis control gives you finer control still, effectively speeding up the release. So there's so few controls on it, but at the same time, there's so much depth to what you can do with that limited number of controls, which is always something fun to find inside of a plugin. Speaking of favorite plugins and having fun with them, one of the questions I always like to ask all the guests on this channel is, do you have a top few other favorite Plugin Alliance plugins that you're most likely to pull out in your day-to-day mixing work?
Well, let's think about that for a second. I'm limited to three. Black Box, probably the top of the list. And anything I'm about to name is inevitably going to be in every single mix I do at this point. That's at the top of the list. Saturation plugin that is wildly versatile as well. Lindell 80, which is a more of a character EQ that seemed to be kind of a Neve flavor. There is a high end on the EQ where 3 dB or even less of 10 or 12K is just magic on that particular plugin. Even if I'm using nothing else, just the top end on that particular plugin is amazing. And then, let's see, number 3, the AMEK 200 or 250 lives on my mix bus. I do very little EQ on my mix bus. I do as little as I possibly can because I try to make any major EQ adjustments happen on individual tracks as opposed to trying to become a mastering engineer at the last second. Those would probably be the top 3 and make it into every single mix one way or another.
Perfect. Couldn't ask for a better list. Craig, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really excited to see your walkthrough and demonstration and hear what kinds of sounds you got out of this compressor. Again, best way for you guys to hear it is not only check out Craig's demo right here on this channel, but also try it out for yourself. Go over to plugin-alliance.com where you can try out this or anything else they make for free for 2 weeks. And if you're a Mega Subscription subscriber, this is now just yet another tool that's included in your bundle at no additional charge. I hope you really have a fun time playing around with it. I know I did. It sounds like Craig did too. If you do give it a try, let us know in the comments below. What did you like it the most on? What did you find unique and useful about this plugin? Love to hear from you guys. I read every single comment down there. Thanks again for hanging out with us. This has been Justin Coletti of Sonic Scoop on the Plugin Alliance channel with Craig Bauer.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us. See you next time.